Most of the PPC answers are conditional based on setting. And so the first assumption I'm going to make is when somebody's first launching their first product, that their budget is going to be constrained. Usually a first-time Amazon FBA seller, they're side hustling. This is a
Right.
pipe dream. They are still working full time and they're trying to get something off the ground. And for those people, typically their budget is going to be $10,000 all in, right? That's going to
Right.
include COGS, that's going to include logistics, and often a very heavy chunk of that 10K is eaten before we get to PPC. That's like mistake number one, I think new product launch sellers run into is that they blow their entire budget before they have any advertising off the ground. We're going to be looking at week one, $2,000, best case
Yeah,
scenario.
absolutely best. Yeah.
Yeah. And for most sellers, probably more like $2,000 for the full first month or two, right? They have to really make it. So a minimum order quantity for a typical starter product is 1,000 units, but some people are getting away with 200 to 500. So now with those assumptions in place, what would I do with those constraints? First thing I would do is I would set up a bunch of different campaign type and I would put 80% of my budget behind two campaign types specifically, auto campaigns and broad match. This is going to be something that's going to set me apart from most PPC supposed
Right.
experts in the space because a lot of them want to dive in a heavy proportion of their budget into exact match really early on. And I'm only leaving 20% for that. So 80% of the budget's day one, broad match, and auto campaigns. There's a very heavy reason why I do this. So I launched a mom box 3 years ago, basically 30 days before Mother's Day in the United States.
Mhm.
And I was able to sell $144,000 in
Wow.
30 days. And
That's a
of
lot.
that, $11,000 was spent on PPC. So I spent 11K month one on a product launch, generated 144K. Now, what's going to surprise most people is that I spent $8,000 of that 11K specifically on broad match. One single keyword, broad match, gifts for mom. Now, obviously, I had the seasonality and the fact that it spikes like 1 million impressions going into Mother's Day, and there's a lot of reasons why I did it the way I did it. And this is easily replicatable. But the basic fact is this: I was able to get my product to organic rank number one for the term gifts for mom 48 hours before Mother's Day. The key to a great broad or an auto campaign, which costs less than an exact match campaign, is the negations. And this is where I think a lot of the PPC community is led astray in negation strategy. I think that they negate the opposite of the actual thing they should negate. So I think a lot of old school PPC courses taught you negate good keywords and then you segment them out. And I'm pro segmentation, let's be clear, but I think there's a misunderstanding of why you segment or how you segment and cannibalization. And I'd love to dive into that. But
Right.
primarily on an auto and broad match campaign, any keyword that's converting, leave it alone. Let's say I'm selling this metal tumbler here, the keyword like wine glass or the keyword plastic showed up and it's a steel tumbler. Chances of that working for a steel tumbler is extraordinarily low. That's going to make sense to negate. But if I was following the PPC advice of, 2015 from the typical standard PPC course, if I got the steel tumbler keyword to convert on an auto, it would teach to negate it there and then put it into an exact match campaign. Probably was valid back in 2015, quite frankly. But like the problem with that in 2025 is that PPC costs are higher on exact match bidding because everybody has been taught to build these exact match campaigns and are ignoring the auto and the broad. And therefore, the cost to obtain that impression is actually lower on the auto and the broad. And Amazon seems to be rewarding it disproportionately. They're pushing it more and more. Why? Well, you can look at the way they changed the settings of exact match campaign. There's no such thing as exact match anymore. It's
Yeah. Right.
exact-ish match. They're clearly pushing you towards the looser targets on purpose. So you might as well embrace that and then build the broad campaign and then negate all the things that Amazon's going to put superfluously in there that don't make sense.
Okay. And what about how that compares for an already established brand? and a launch of a new product?
So I think there's a lot of crossover in the strategies. The biggest difference here is going to be budget and the ability to go deeper or broader, maybe both, on some of these campaign structures. So I think when you're a first time seller, there's so many things that are confusing, and there's just so much road rash to obtain. There's a lot of taxes you have to pay. And I'm not talking about VAT or actual taxes. I'm talking about like mistake taxes. And so when you're first starting out, having an auto campaign is really easy to set up. Having a broad match campaign is really easy to set up, just hard to manage, because you go back and add negations. But if we look at the fact that when I did that first time product launch, I spent $8,000 on a single keyword on a broad match, it made it very easy for me to manage that campaign. And it was highly effective, and I had good outcomes. So I think when we look at a more sophisticated brand or its product launch, we're going to see a lot more of diversification on the campaign setup. We're going to probably see a much deeper keyword selection. There's going to be a master keyword list built. And, a new time seller will be like, what's that? An old time seller would be like, well, that's, just the most critical thing you need ever to set up your listing.
Right.
And we call it an MKL. I think somebody like that will have probably 50 to 150 keywords that they're going to hit day one. Whereas a new product, new brand will be hitting like 5 or less. And there's nothing wrong with either of these strategies. It's a budget question. Because if you're going to put $8,000 on the keyword gifts for mom, you don't need to set up 17 different campaigns. But with an established product, you want to go deeper and broader. And so here's a few ways you could do that, and also one mistake to avoid. You're going to make lots of different campaigns. You're going to probably have exact match campaigns set up day one, because you're going to have that master keyword list. But one of the mistakes that I see is that sometimes people will build a campaign with too many keywords in it. And this is what causes keyword cannibalization. Fun fact, you can have the same keyword on multiple campaigns. That's not cannibalizing your bids. But if you have 50 keywords on the same campaign, what happens? 80% of your impressions go to 5 keywords. Therefore, those 5 keywords are cannibalizing the other 45. And so those 45 keywords could have been really good for you had they been segmented out. One way you could do this to segment them out is to have groupings of related keywords. So you might have 5 keywords related to gifts using the same mom box strategy. And then another 5 keywords could be about the lotion and the raspberry scent gift, or one of the individual products, and segment it out that way, because it's a mom box and there's lots of different things in it. And by doing this, those keywords won't cannibalize each other, and they'll have more room to breathe. And once something is working, don't screw it up, right? Like the money you've spent to get a working campaign, leave it alone.
It's like an investment in the algorithm, in
Yes.
the historical data. So if you cancel that, you cancel the investment and you start over.
One of the questions I'll get every few months is like, hey, my PPC is a mess. Should I start over? And I'll be like, no, don't start over.
Get that.
Yeah, either hire the PPC expert to come clean it up, or you have to just start making new campaigns, but don't turn off the old ones.